This came after years of protest against the unethical, aggressive promotion of breast milk substitutes, particularly in the developing world, which was resulting in women giving up breastfeeding, which is life-saving in many situations, to buy these expensive, inferior substitutes that often led to morbidity and mortality of children.
So what does the code say?
This code calls on governments to adopt legislation at the national level to prohibit all forms of promotion of breast milk substitutes, feeding bottles, and teats.
So the code is just a recommendation. It's not something that governments and signatories are legally obliged to do?
We would argue that governments do have to do it because that is an obligation that every country except one in the world has undertaken by ratifying the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So we actually see it as a legal obligation. And we do have 136 countries around the world that have implemented some form of legislation to implement the international code.
So has legislation been put into place in those countries?
In some countries, they have very good legislation. For example, in Africa, South Africa has excellent legislation. Kenya has good legislation. Nigeria. And you do see an improvement in the practices in countries where there is legislation. However, there are still some sorts of violations that still occur, those that are more difficult to detect.
Like what, for example?
Perhaps the subtle promotion through the healthcare system, the conflicts of interest that occur when, for example, the formula companies are sponsoring the medical associations, etc., which tends to lead them to look more favourably on formula. So something that we're really trying to work much more on now is the monitoring and enforcement of those regulations. And there is one other role in this for the NGOs, for example, the International Baby Food Action Network, which is very active around the world. They gather evidence of these violations, and this obviously helps us in our advocacy with the governments to be able to say, look, we have this evidence. You need to strengthen your regulations, and in most cases, you need to have a systematic monitoring and enforcement mechanism so that we can really hold these companies accountable.
In practical terms, where do you actually hold some of these companies accountable for?
There are often health claims made about these products that are not substantiated. In Asia, for example, where people really want their kids to be smart and do well in school, the formulas say that they are going to improve the child's IQ.
How do they say that if there's no advertising?
A lot of it goes on the supermarket shelves with things to draw your attention to the product. They even now have them with videos running telling how this product is going to improve your child's immunity or eyesight. This is false advertising. Those are the sorts of ways that the companies try and persuade women to buy their products. If the advertising gets them to believe that purchasing this product is going to be the best thing for their children, they're very likely to do that and give up breastfeeding.
Overall, would you say that the code has been successful in turning the tide away from these substitutes toward breastfeeding, both within families and in national cultures as well?
The code is only one part. We also need to make sure that they get the support that they need. For example, in hospital, keeping the baby and the mother together so that she can breastfeed when the baby needs to be breastfed. And when she returns to work, she needs to be able to either breastfeed her baby at work or express her breast milk so that she can continue. So there's a whole series of things that need to be in place to provide an environment that lets a mother make an informed decision, and then to be in an environment that enables her to carry out that decision to breastfeed her baby.